Threat modeling versus threat hunting. What's the difference? Well, to illustrate threat modeling, let's picture an analogy using a real life model called Sally, who is looking for her Prince Charming, but not without assessing his qualities through the use of threat modeling and threat hunting. You see, it all starts with threat modeling, which is the security process where potential threats are identified, categorized, and analyzed. You see, Sally is the model who has to then find Mr. Right whilst avoiding Mr. Wrong, aka the threat, by the use of threat modeling. Think of threat modeling as weighing up all the pros and cons of Mr. Right versus Mr. Wrong. The earlier this threat modeling is done, the better the chances of Sally finding Mr. Right in a sea of Mr. Wrongs. In fact, threat modeling isn't meant to be a single event. Instead, it's meant to be initiated early in the design process of a system and continue throughout its life cycle. Because Mr. Right can become Mr. Wrong throughout his life cycle if these early threats are not detected through threat modeling in the early design stages. In a similar way that courtship is enacted in the early stages of love, meaning Sally has to look past those handsome faces of those potential suitors in order to determine who is Mr. Right and who is Mr. Wrong. This helps eradicate or prioritize the potential for harm and to reduce the risk of this occurring. Now, if you recall earlier in the video, I mentioned that threat modeling is not a single event. Instead, it is a continuous event. In the same way that courtship of Sally is not meant to be a single event, aka a rose, but a continuous process, aka a set of roses. For example, Microsoft uses the Security Development Lifecycle (SDL), also known as SD3 plus C, which has the motto of Secure by Design, Secure by Default, Secure in Development and Communication. It has two goals in mind with this process. The first being to reduce the number of security related design and coding defects. The second being to reduce the severity of any remaining defects. Important technical keynote. Threat modeling is referred to as a defensive approach or proactive approach, which takes place in the early stages of development, aka courtship, to help Sally identify threats that could derail her future love story. There are three approaches. The first is Sally could focus on the assets that Mr. Right brings and how to keep them for herself. The second approach is Sally could be focused on the attackers, aka the Catwomans that are trying to lure or entice Mr. Right away from her. And thirdly, Sally could focus on the software, aka those pesky dating apps that are trying to lure Mr. Right away from her. Keynote: it is common to pair threats with vulnerabilities to identify those threats that can exploit assets and represent significant risks to the organization, aka threats to Sally's dream of finding Mr. Right and her future love story. An ultimate goal of threat modeling is to prioritize the potential threats against an organization's valuable assets. So, when attempting to inventory and categorize threats, it is often helpful to use a guide or reference. In fact, Microsoft have also developed a threat categorization model known as STRIDE, which covers a range of different threats, which we will explain in detail in a future video. There are also other models for threat categorization, such as PASTA, Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis, which consists of 7 stages but the key takeaway is that it is a risk-centric approach, aiming to select or develop countermeasures in relation to the value of the assets to be protected. You can easily remember this threat model by remembering PASTA is a risk. One other threat model mentioned in the CISSP exam is the VAST, VAST, which stands for Visual, Agile and Simple Threat. An easy way to remember the VAST threat model is that VAST is agile, aka related to software development, in an agile and scalable basis. Now that was all part of Phase 1, identifying threats. Let's move on to Phase 2, which is determining and diagramming potential attacks, which is usually the creation of diagrams detailing all the technical elements and components and transactions of data flow and all the related privilege boundaries. In relation to Sally, in this stage, she would overthink every single element when meeting potential Mr. Right. From the moment he winks and she blushes, and he gives her the rose and invites her for a romantic drink, which she accepts and at the end gives him a cheeky kiss, and later much more, which then leads to the ring and the engagement and the marriage, etc., etc. Sally has her love story with Mr. Right. Oh, yeah. First came love, then came marriage, then came Sally with the baby carriage. Now that's the diagramming elements, but what about the potential attacks? What if Mr. Right abuses the trust boundaries, or is caught entertaining Catwoman in the input points, or worse, talking or communicating through data flow paths with the Catwoman? Or the worst scenario, where all these three are enacted and Mr. Right enacts privileged operations with the Catwoman at Sally's expense. So Sally must keep details about the security stance and approach. This is all known as the reduction analysis, after which the next and final phase is known as the prioritization and response phase, which is to rank or rate the identified and categorized and documented threats from all the stages above. This can be accomplished using a wide range of techniques, most commonly the probability times damage potential equation, using the DREAD rating system, which can easily be remembered by DREAD is the divorce, aka prioritization response. So those are all the stages of the threat modeling, which leads us nicely to threat hunting. You see, not all threats can be predicted during the design phase, so a reactive approach to threat management is still needed to address unforeseen issues, usually those that take place after a product has been created or deployed, and those flaws or vulnerabilities are identified and fixed through countermeasures known as patches. So, think of threat hunting as when Sally has met her Mr. Right and has got married, and only after has she realized that when she married Mr. Right, his first name turned out to be Always. So the threat hunting discovered that Mr. Always Right has become Mr. Wrong. So Sally's reactive countermeasure, aka patch, is to initiate a divorce. A divorce entails additional effort due to patching, which creates less effective security improvements over time at the cost of potentially reducing functionality and user friendliness. So, to recap, threat modeling can be described as proactive, whereas threat hunting is reactive, aka a divorce. Key technical caveat: Sometimes threat modeling can be performed as a proactive measure during the design and development phase, or in some cases, a reactive measure once the product has been deployed. Either way, it is difficult to capture all the red flags. Therefore, a combination of both approaches usually is the best approach. In an upcoming video, I shall be discussing all the threat models mentioned throughout this video in more technical detail, so please be sure that you have liked and subscribed to this channel if not already, to ensure you do not miss any future content. In the meantime, you can check out many more cybersecurity cartoons around the CISSP exam, explained like I am a 2-year-old on my YouTube channel. And finally, thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content as much as I enjoyed creating it.